to the Who's On Podcast Postgame Report here down in Raleigh, North Carolina after Virginia falls to NC State 35-31 in a non-conference matchup between these two schools, extending Virginia's losing streak, I guess you could say, down here in Raleigh. Since 2012 is the last time they won here at Carter-Finley Stadium, but it's only been a handful of times that these two programs have actually faced each other. I want to set up this by going back to how I kind of prefaced this game. I came into this thinking this is a game Virginia. This is a game that 8-4 teams, 9-3 teams, even 7-6 teams, these are the type of games they win. Tough non-conference games on the road, or tough conference matchups on the road in a pretty even matchup. And, you know, this is also vice versa, the type of teams that teams scraping to try to get to bowl eligibility lose. I'm going to say and change that just a little bit here today. I still think that, you know, probably it's going to be a lot tougher to get to that 8-win ceiling that I saw before the season. But, you know, 7 wins, 6 wins, that's obviously still on the table. There's 10 games left to go in the season and still a pretty favorable schedule when you look at it in large. And this Virginia team, this is a game that, you know, honestly came down to a couple different factors, you know, throughout it. And I feel like this, you know, it's going to be a pretty disappointing loss, one that fans will probably, rightfully so, hang on to for a little bit. And but there's a couple things I want to hit on today. First of all, I thought this is one of Des Kitchen, the offensive coordinator's best called games since he's been here at Virginia. There were a number of things that you could kind of nitpick here and there. Probably 2 plays that come to my mind is, you know, a 3rd down call on the 15-yard line there in the first half when they settled for a field goal eventually when they ran the ball. Probably, in my opinion, could have thrown the ball there. The other one, we'll go back to that Jamari Taylor toss play on the run play there that they didn't pick up the first down. Those are really the only 2 plays that I think you could kind of pick out of what Des Kitchings did here today in Raleigh and kind of be like, maybe you could have done something different. But overall, this was a fantastic offensive performance. You know, you look at the offensive line, they were down their starting right tackle with Wallace Unamba, who was out today. They played Jack Whitmer there. They played Ethan Sipe there at right tackle. And for the large part, Chandler Morris was never touched in the pocket. They also ran the ball extremely well with Jamari Taylor going over 100 yards, having 3 touchdowns. So it was a good game overall from the offensive line. And you look at the receivers, you didn't have the explosive games that Cam Ross or Trell Harris, even Jamal Edgerrin had last week in the opener against Coastal Carolina. So I think they were missing a little bit of that. But Chandler Morris distributed the ball really well, got it to a number of different wide receivers. And guess what? They just stuck the ball on the ground and went with it. Jamari Taylor kind of had his big breakout performance going, you know, for well over 100 yards and breaking off, you know, 2 really crazy touchdown runs there on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1, and also having 3 touchdowns. He's the first UVA running back to have 3 touchdowns in a game since Mike Hollins back in 21 against UNC, or 22. One of those games for Mike Hollins, but he was also the first running back for UVA to have 5 touchdowns in their first 2 games at UVA since Kevin Parks Jr. all the way back in 2011. So that's how special his kind of start to the season has been, and it was a bit of a homecoming for him. He's from North Carolina, from Charlotte area, obviously played his, you know, first few years of college football right down the road here in North Carolina Central. That's over in Durham. And he had a lot of fans in the stands today, a lot of family coming back to watch this one. And also the guy he was kind of dueling against through most of this game was Hollywood Smothers, the running back for NC State. Both those guys, Charlotte guys. So they kind of had a little bit of rivalry going on there. But let's get back to kind of the questions at hand. Again, I think this was a really good game called by Des Kitchings. So I'm not going to nitpick that as much. You could go back to that, you know, the decision to kick the 47-yard field goal there with Will Bettridge. You know, probably should have gone for it there. I completely agree with that. Not Des Kitchings' call. That's a Tony Elliott decision. So can't really put that on Des Kitchings' ledger there. Again, ricocheted off the upright. Bettridge, that was his career long before that. It was a 47-yard kick. He's hit that twice in his college career. Obviously, doesn't have the biggest leg. If they had gotten that 3 points, probably changes that last 2-minute drive. So let's go back to the 2-minute drive now, and we'll get to the defense. Trust me, there's a lot to talk about on the defense, but let's go back to that 2-minute drive. The UVA offense this season so far through the first couple games has been very good in the 2-minute drill. You saw they scored a touchdown towards the end of the half against Coastal Carolina. They scored a touchdown here in Raleigh today at the end of the half with the 2-minute drill. Going into that last drive, I felt a lot of confidence that this team was going to find a way to score take the lead in this game, and we'll see what the defense does with however much time Virginia left them on the play clock. You go into that with a little bit more than 2 minutes left, so you still have the 2-minute timeout. You had the timeout that was in your pocket as well going into that. So you had 2 timeouts, more than 2 minutes to go in the game. Chandler Morris moving the ball pretty well down the field, and that's kind of when the receivers really kind of made their big plays for the day. Jamal Edgerrin, who I kind of believe has been kind of Chandler Morris's safety blanket. When in doubt, go to Jamal Edgerrin. Big third down plays, going over the middle, big toss-up plays. That I think Jamal Edgerrin and him have a really special connection, especially on scramble drills. And then Cam Ross dropped one earlier in the possession. It was a tough catch, but then comes back and makes probably the best catch on that drive, and really keeps the ball moving down the field. Now we go back to the final play. Chandler Morris obviously throws the interception in the end zone. The play as it was set up there is Morris to roll out. It's a wheel route by the running back, Jamari Taylor. And this is something that the two of them had talked about a lot, because in that situation, Jamari Taylor is one-on-one against the defensive end. And Taylor told us after the game that, he had been pointing that out to Chandler Morris throughout the game and said, hey, this is a play. I think we have a big mismatch here. So that's a play they were looking for there. Morris, I've heard a lot of people chime in. You had Dakota Twitty wide open underneath, or wide open down in the flat. And Morris, says that's not something that he really thought about. His 2 options there were throw the ball to Jamari Taylor or throw it away out of bounds, fight again for another play. He didn't consider Dakota Twitty a viable option on that play, because he would have had to throw the ball back across his chest, across his shoulders. That's what he said. That's what his kind of comment on that play was. I know a lot of these guys, they haven't seen the replays yet. We've barely seen the replays. We're coming fresh out of the press conferences right now, but I know that's what people's first take is. And look, it was a bad pass in the end of the day. He threw it short. Probably should have thrown it to the back shoulder if he was going to throw it at all. A little bit of a hasty play, and obviously that's what the game comes down to. But without a doubt, this game was not won or lost on offense. It was not lost on offense. It was not lost by Des Kitchings. It was not lost by Chandler Morris. It was lost because of the defense at the end of the day. You saw what this NC State team did against them to start the game. Carved them up like butter. You saw the second half. They came out, carved them up again. Now, the defense did come up with a couple plays there late in the game to be able to kind of change the momentum, give Virginia a chance there on offense to come back and take the lead. But, of course, there had been so much already, and I kind of bring it down to one thing. First thing I saw was less is more. We talked a lot about this depth that Virginia has on the defensive line, linebacker, and so on. There was way too much rotation going on. Guys were not in the right spot. It was a lot of miscommunication. And I think that kind of fixed itself as the game went on. Tony Elliott said situationally, that's why you saw some less rotation as the game went on. But I think that was a change for them, and that actually helped them later on in the game by rotating less, keeping that first team out there on the field. Now, the second thing, bad angles. That was a big problem all day today. I think back to one play, Landon Danley had a wide open, shot at CJ Bailey in the pocket, completely takes the wrong angle. Bailey rolls out, misses Danley, and gets into for an easy touchdown run. Those are the type of plays, those are the angles that Virginia was missing all day. There was a play on the touchdown pass CJ Bailey threw. Christian Charles, instead of backing up with the player that had got beyond him, he tried to jump and touch the ball. That's a no-go. There's a lot of different one of those plays where just guys weren't in the right position, guys weren't taking the right angles, and I think that really hurt this team. Now, Mitchell Melton, the defensive end, said after the game that it's going to come down to moments and not kind of lingering on these moments to kind of fix a lot of these defensive issues. We'll see kind of how Virginia responds. Now, they got obviously a little bit of a softer landing next week at home against William & Mary and the Mike London as a Cop Bowl at Scott Stadium. Then the following week, they have their ACC opener. Yeah, that's not the ACC opener, of course. Stanford at home. That's the ACC opener before they then turn around and play that Friday night game at home against Florida State. So these are the big things. Can Virginia, take these moments and kind of rebound from here against, William & Mary, Stanford, get right games before they play Florida State, because a win against Florida State, an upset there, would really obviously change the dynamics of this season. But that's going to do it here. Obviously, we have a lot more coming up on the Sabre.com. We have more, as always, on the Who's On podcast throughout the week. You can catch our review of the game there on Monday or Tuesday, depending. And then we'll have more later in the week. We actually have Griff Aldrich, UVA Associate Head Men's Basketball Coach, coming on the podcast later in the week. So a lot more to come here on the Who's On podcast. And, of course, we'll be here with the post-game report exclusively on our new Who's On podcast YouTube channel after every game. So we'll see you then.